now, your brain is lying to you about money, and you have no idea. If you've ever felt guilty about wanting more, if you've ever sabotaged your own financial progress, or if success somehow feels wrong when you achieve it, then what I'm about to share will explain patterns you've noticed, but never understood. In the next 50 minutes, you'll discover why financial freedom can feel like wearing someone else's clothes, why your identity fights back when your circumstances improve, and most importantly, how to navigate this psychological territory with awareness instead of confusion. But first, I need to tell you about something that happened before you could even speak. Whether you're fully focused right now, or simply letting this play in the background while you work, rest, or drift to sleep, your subconscious mind is listening. The gentle frequencies woven into this audio are designed to quietly reprogram your relationship with money and abundance. So there's no need to concentrate. Just relax. Let the words and frequencies do their work. Your mind will absorb what it needs. The invisible inheritance. Picture a 7-year-old sitting at a kitchen table, watching her parents argue about money. She doesn't understand the words, mortgage, credit, bills, but she understands the tension, the way her mother's voice gets tight, the way her father's shoulders slump. She absorbs something deeper than language. Money equals stress. Money equals conflict. Money equals danger. This child doesn't decide to believe these things. Her nervous system simply records them as truth. And 30 years later, when she finally starts earning good money, her body remembers that old kitchen table. Success triggers the same stress response that conflict once did. This is what I call the invisible inheritance. Not the money our parents left us, but the beliefs they unknowingly passed down. The unconscious programming that shapes every financial decision we make, often in ways that seem completely irrational. Dr. Brad Klontz, a financial psychologist, has studied this phenomenon extensively. He's found that our money beliefs are typically formed before age 7, during what psychologists call the imprint period. During these early years, our brains are essentially recording everything as absolute truth. We're not yet capable of critical thinking or questioning what we observe. So when a young child witnesses financial stress, scarcity, or conflict around money, their developing brain doesn't think, this is one family's temporary situation. Instead, it records, this is how money works. This is what money does to people. This is what I can expect when money is involved. These early imprints become what psychologists call implicit beliefs, deeply held assumptions that operate below our conscious awareness. They're not thoughts we think, they're truths we feel, and they have enormous power over our behavior, especially when we're under stress or making important decisions. Consider Sarah, a successful marketing executive who grew up in a household where money was always scarce. Her parents worked multiple jobs, argued frequently about finances, and often used phrases like money doesn't grow on trees, and we can't afford that. As an adult, Sarah earned a 6-figure salary, but she found herself unable to enjoy her success. Every time she received a bonus or promotion, she felt anxious rather than excited. She would immediately find ways to spend or give away the extra money, as if holding on to it felt dangerous. She couldn't understand why financial success triggered such discomfort until she began to recognize the invisible inheritance she'd received. Her nervous system had been programmed to associate financial abundance with instability. In her family system, having money meant it could be lost. Security came from having just enough, not from having plenty. So when her adult circumstances contradicted this early programming, her body responded with anxiety and the urge to return to familiar territory. This isn't about blame or shame. Our parents did the best they could with their own inherited programming. But understanding this invisible inheritance is crucial, because it explains why logical financial advice often fails. Why someone can know exactly what they should do with money, but find themselves doing the opposite. The rational mind might understand that saving and investing are wise choices, but if the nervous system has been programmed to associate financial accumulation with danger, it will find ways to sabotage those efforts. Not consciously, but through 1,000 small decisions and behaviors that keep us within our comfort zone. The identity fortress. Our sense of self is remarkably persistent. Psychologists have discovered that we have what's called an identity maintenance system, a collection of unconscious mechanisms designed to keep us consistent with our self-concept. This system works tirelessly to ensure that our external circumstances match our internal identity. Think of it as a thermostat for the soul. Just as a thermostat maintains a consistent temperature by turning the heat up or down, our identity maintenance system adjusts our behavior to maintain a consistent sense of self. When our circumstances start to diverge too far from our identity, this system activates to bring us back into alignment. Dr. Robert Cialdini, in his research on influence and persuasion, found that consistency is one of the most powerful psychological forces governing human behavior. We have a deep need to appear consistent with our previous actions, statements, and beliefs. This consistency principle extends to our financial identity as well. If someone has always thought of themselves as not good with money, then suddenly becoming financially successful creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable feeling that arises when our actions contradict our beliefs. The mind seeks to resolve this dissonance, often by sabotaging the success rather than updating the identity. Consider Michael, who grew up in a working-class family where financial struggle was worn as a badge of honor. His father often said things like, "We may not have much, but we're honest people, and rich folks don't understand real problems." These statements created an unconscious equation in Michael's mind. Good people struggle financially, and financial ease indicates moral compromise. As an adult, Michael started a small business that became unexpectedly successful. Instead of celebrating, he found himself increasingly uncomfortable. He began to question whether he was charging too much, whether he deserved his success, whether he was somehow taking advantage of people. Eventually, he made a series of decisions that brought his income back down to a more appropriate level. This wasn't conscious self-sabotage. Michael genuinely believed he was making ethical business decisions. But underneath, his identity maintenance system was working to resolve the dissonance between his success and his deeply held belief that good people don't have too much money. The identity fortress is particularly strong around what psychologists call core beliefs, fundamental assumptions about ourselves and the world. These might include beliefs like "I'm not the type of person who has money," or "people like me don't get ahead," or "financial success requires compromising your values." These core beliefs often feel like absolute truth rather than opinions. They're so deeply embedded in our sense of self that questioning them can feel like questioning reality itself. And when our external circumstances begin to contradict these beliefs, the fortress walls go up. The fortress manifests in various ways. Sometimes it's through self-sabotage, making decisions that bring us back to familiar territory. Sometimes it's through what psychologists call imposter syndrome, the persistent feeling that our success is undeserved or fraudulent. Sometimes it's through guilt, anxiety, or depression when good things happen. But here's what's particularly interesting. The identity fortress doesn't just protect us from success we haven't earned. It also protects us from success we have earned. The system doesn't distinguish between deserved and undeserved outcomes. It simply maintains consistency with our self-concept, regardless of whether that self-concept serves us. Dr. Carol Dweck's research on mindset reveals something crucial about this process. She's found that people with what she calls a fixed mindset believe their abilities and characteristics are static. They see success or failure as reflections of their inherent worth rather than the result of effort and learning. When someone with a fixed mindset about money, someone who believes they're just not good with finances, begins to experience financial success, it creates a crisis of identity. The success doesn't feel like evidence of growth or learning. It feels like a mistake that needs to be corrected. Understanding the identity fortress helps explain why positive thinking and affirmations often fail to create lasting change. You can't simply think your way out of a deeply held identity. The fortress is too well defended, too automatic, too unconscious to be dismantled through conscious effort alone. The comfort zone paradox. We often think of comfort zones as places of ease and relaxation, but psychologically, there's something quite different. A comfort zone isn't necessarily comfortable. It's familiar. It's the range of experiences, emotions, and circumstances that feel known and predictable, even if they're unpleasant. Dr. Alastair White, who has studied optimal performance in comfort zones extensively, defines the comfort zone as a behavioral space where activities and behaviors fit a routine and pattern that minimizes stress and risk. Notice that the definition isn't about pleasure or satisfaction. It's about minimizing unpredictability. This distinction is crucial when we're examining financial behavior. Someone might be genuinely unhappy with their financial situation, but if that situation is familiar, their nervous system will interpret it as safe. The known quantity of financial struggle can feel more secure than the unknown territory of financial abundance. Consider the case of lottery winners. Research by Dr. Philip Brickman found that lottery winners, after an initial period of excitement, often report being no happier than they were before their windfall. Some even report being less happy. This isn't because money doesn't matter. It's because sudden wealth pushes them far outside their comfort zone. The lottery winner's nervous system hasn't had time to adjust to the new reality. Their identity, their social connections, their daily routines, their sense of what's normal, all of these are suddenly misaligned with their circumstances. The result is often anxiety, depression, and ironically, a desire to return to more familiar territory. This is the comfort zone paradox. We can simultaneously want change and resist it. Our conscious mind might desperately desire financial improvement, while our unconscious mind works to maintain familiar patterns. It's not that we don't want to succeed. It's that success feels foreign, and therefore threatening. Dr. Robert Maurer, who developed the concept of Kaizen for personal change, explains that our brains are wired to resist change as a survival mechanism. The amygdala, our brain's alarm system, is designed to treat anything unfamiliar as potentially dangerous. This served our ancestors well when unfamiliar meant predators or poisonous plants, but in modern life, it can sabotage our efforts to improve our circumstances. When we start earning more money, saving successfully, or making wise investments, we're literally venturing into unfamiliar neurological territory. The brain doesn't distinguish between positive unfamiliarity and negative unfamiliarity. It simply registers different and activates stress responses designed to return us to known patterns. This explains why people often sabotage themselves just as they're beginning to succeed. The self-sabotage isn't evidence of moral weakness or lack of willpower. It's the nervous system doing exactly what it's designed to do: maintain homeostasis and avoid perceived threats. The comfort zone paradox becomes even more complex when we consider what psychologists call learned helplessness. Dr. Martin Seligman's research showed that when people repeatedly experience situations where their actions don't seem to matter, they can develop a generalized belief that they have no control over outcomes. Someone who grew up in financial chaos where money came and went unpredictably, where hard work didn't necessarily lead to security, where external forces seemed to control everything, might develop learned helplessness around money. Even as an adult with actual control over their financial choices, they might unconsciously recreate chaos because chaos feels normal and control feels foreign. The paradox deepens when we realize that staying in our comfort zone often requires considerable effort and stress. Think about someone who consistently spends their entire paycheck, never saving anything. Maintaining that pattern actually requires vigilant attention to ensure they don't accidentally accumulate money. They have to find ways to spend or give away any surplus that threatens to expand their financial comfort zone. This isn't conscious behavior. It's the automatic functioning of a nervous system that has learned to associate financial accumulation with danger or discomfort. The person might consciously want to save money, but their unconscious programming drives them to maintain familiar financial territory. Understanding the comfort zone paradox helps explain why gradual change is often more sustainable than dramatic change. When we push too hard against our comfort zone boundaries, we trigger stronger resistance. But when we expand slowly, allowing our nervous system time to adjust and recognize new patterns as safe, we can achieve lasting transformation. Success anxiety and the fear of visibility. Success brings visibility, and visibility can feel dangerous to a nervous system that learned early that being noticed meant being vulnerable. Dr. Gay Hendricks, in his work on what he calls upper limit problems, has identified a common pattern. People unconsciously sabotage themselves when they approach their highest level of success, love, or creativity. This isn't about fear of failure, it's about fear of success, and it's more common than most people realize. Success anxiety can manifest as procrastination just before a breakthrough, making careless mistakes when everything is going well, or finding ways to create drama or problems when life becomes too good. The fear of visibility has deep evolutionary roots. In our ancestral environment, standing out from the group could be dangerous. The tallest poppy gets cut down first. The nail that sticks up gets hammered down. These aren't just sayings, they reflect genuine survival wisdom that our nervous systems still carry. Dr. Brené Brown's research on vulnerability and shame reveals that many people have what she calls foreboding joy, the inability to feel good without waiting for the other shoe to drop. When something wonderful happens, instead of celebrating, they immediately begin scanning for potential threats or problems. This foreboding joy is particularly common around financial success. Someone might receive a bonus, promotion, or unexpected windfall, but instead of feeling grateful or excited, they feel anxious. They start worrying about taxes, about whether they deserve it, about what others will think, about whether it will last. Consider Jennifer, who grew up in a family where financial success was viewed with suspicion. Her parents often made comments about wealthy people being greedy, selfish, or corrupt. They prided themselves on being salt of the earth people who didn't need much to be happy. Love and approval in Jennifer's family were tied to humility and modest living. As an adult, Jennifer became a successful freelance designer. But each time her income increased, she felt increasingly uncomfortable. She worried that clients would think she was charging too much. She felt guilty about earning more than her friends. She even started turning down high-paying projects because they felt too good to be true. Jennifer's success anxiety wasn't really about money. It was about belonging and love. Her unconscious mind had learned that financial success might threaten her connection to the people who mattered most. So her nervous system created anxiety around success to protect her from the perceived threat of isolation or rejection. Success anxiety often intensifies when we surpass the achievements of our family members or peer group. Psychologists call this survivor guilt. the uncomfortable feeling that arises when we succeed while others struggle. Even when our success doesn't come at anyone else's expense, we might feel guilty about having more than people we care about. Dr. Pauline Boss, who studies ambiguous loss and trauma, has found that success can sometimes trigger grief for the identity we're leaving behind. When we achieve financial goals, we're not just gaining something, we're also losing something. We're losing the familiar struggle, the shared experience of financial stress, the identity of someone who doesn't have much money. This grief is rarely acknowledged or processed, but it's real, and it can manifest as depression, anxiety, or self-sabotage, just when we should be celebrating our achievements. The mind doesn't distinguish between positive losses and negative losses. It simply registers that something familiar is gone. The fear of visibility also connects to what psychologists call tall poppy syndrome, the tendency to resent or attack people who stand out from the group. If we grew up witnessing successful people being criticized, judged, or ostracized, our nervous system might have learned that success equals social danger. This creates an impossible bind. We want to succeed, but we also want to belong. We want to achieve our goals, but we also want to maintain our relationships. When these desires feel incompatible, anxiety is the natural result. Understanding success anxiety helps explain why some people seem to have a success ceiling, a level of achievement they approach but never quite surpass. It's not that they lack ability or opportunity. It's that their nervous system has learned to interpret higher levels of success as threatening. The key insight here is that success anxiety isn't a character flaw or a sign of weakness. It's a protective mechanism that developed for good reasons, even if those reasons are no longer relevant. Recognizing this allows us to approach our anxiety with compassion rather than judgment, and to work with our nervous system rather than against it. The weight of wealth guilt, is perhaps one of the most misunderstood aspects of financial psychology. It's not simply feeling bad about having money. It's a complex emotional response that can include shame, responsibility, fear, and confusion about one's place in the world. Dr. Dennis Jaff, who has studied wealthy families for decades, describes wealth guilt as the psychological burden that can come with financial privilege. This burden can affect not only those born into wealth, but also those who acquire it through their own efforts. The guilt doesn't discriminate between inherited and earned money. Wealth guilt often stems from what psychologists call survivor guilt, the feeling that having more than others is somehow wrong or unfair. This can be particularly intense for people who grew up in struggling communities and later achieved financial success. They might feel guilty about leaving others behind, or worry that their success somehow contributed to others' struggles. Consider David, who grew up in a low-income neighborhood where most families struggled to make ends meet. Through education and hard work, he became a successful software engineer, earning a substantial salary. But instead of feeling proud of his achievements, he felt increasingly isolated and guilty. When he visited his old neighborhood, he felt uncomfortable about his nice car and expensive clothes. When friends from childhood struggled financially, he felt responsible for helping them, even when that help enabled destructive patterns. He found himself constantly apologizing for his success or downplaying his achievements. David's wealth guilt wasn't really about the money itself. It was about identity, belonging, and fairness. His unconscious mind had learned to associate financial struggle with moral virtue and community membership. Success felt like betrayal of his roots and the people who shaped him. Wealth guilt can also arise from religious or cultural programming that equates money with corruption or spiritual poverty. Many spiritual traditions include teachings about the dangers of material attachment, the virtue of poverty, or the difficulty of being both wealthy and righteous. These teachings, when internalized during childhood, can create deep conflicts around financial success. The person might consciously want to improve their circumstances while unconsciously believing that doing so will compromise their spiritual development or moral standing. Dr. Brad Klontz has identified what he calls money avoidance scripts, unconscious beliefs that cause people to avoid accumulating wealth. These scripts often include thoughts like money is the root of all evil, rich people are greedy, or wanting money is selfish. People with strong money avoidance scripts often sabotage their financial success to maintain alignment with their values. The challenge with wealth guilt is that it often prevents people from using their resources effectively. Someone consumed by guilt about having money might make poor financial decisions out of shame or anxiety. They might give money away compulsively, spend it carelessly, or avoid thinking about it altogether. Ironically, wealth guilt can perpetuate the very problems it seeks to address. When someone with resources is paralyzed by guilt, they're less likely to make thoughtful, strategic decisions about how to use their money for good. The guilt becomes an obstacle to positive impact rather than a motivation for it. Research by Dr. Michael Norton at Harvard Business School has shown that wealthy people who feel guilty about their resources often become less generous over time, not more generous. The guilt creates anxiety and avoidance around money, making it harder to engage thoughtfully with financial decisions. Wealth guilt also intersects with what psychologists call imposter syndrome, the persistent feeling that one's success is undeserved or fraudulent. Someone experiencing wealth guilt might constantly question whether they deserve their financial success, regardless of how hard they worked or how honestly they earned it. This questioning can become obsessive and paralyzing. The person might spend enormous amounts of mental energy trying to justify their success or prove their worthiness, energy that could be better spent on productive or generous activities. The resolution of wealth guilt often requires what Dr. Amy Cuddy calls authentic power, the ability to access one's personal power without compromising one's values. This means learning to see financial resources as tools rather than threats, and success as an opportunity for positive impact rather than evidence of moral failure. Understanding wealth guilt helps explain why simply telling someone to be grateful for what you have often backfires. Gratitude is important, but it doesn't address the underlying beliefs and fears that drive the guilt. True resolution requires examining and updating the unconscious programming that created the guilt in the first place. Navigating the psychological adjustment. The transition to financial stability or wealth is essentially a process of identity evolution. Like any significant life change, it requires time, patience, and conscious attention to the psychological adjustments involved. Understanding this process can help normalize the discomfort and provide a roadmap for healthy adaptation. Dr. William Bridges, in his work on life transitions, identifies 3 stages of change: endings, the neutral zone, and new beginnings. Each stage has its own challenges and opportunities, and financial transitions follow this same pattern. The ending stage involves letting go of familiar patterns, beliefs, and identities. For someone transitioning to greater financial security, this might mean releasing the identity of someone who struggles with money or someone who can't afford nice things. Even when these identities were painful, they were familiar, and releasing them can trigger grief. The neutral zone is the in-between time when old patterns have ended but new ones haven't fully formed. This is often the most uncomfortable part of any transition, because nothing feels solid or predictable. Someone in financial transition might feel like they don't belong in their old world anymore, but don't yet feel at home in their new circumstances. The new beginning stage involves fully embodying the new identity and circumstances. This is where someone finally feels comfortable with their financial success and can operate naturally from their new position. But reaching this stage requires patience and self-compassion during the earlier phases. One of the most important aspects of navigating financial transition is what psychologists call identity flexibility, the ability to update our self-concept as circumstances change. People with high identity flexibility can adapt to new situations without losing their core sense of self. Dr. Herminia Ibarra, who studies professional identity transitions, has found that identity change often happens through action rather than introspection. We don't think our way into a new identity, we act our way into it. This means that someone transitioning to financial success might need to practice acting like a financially successful person before they feel like one. This might involve learning new social skills, updating their environment, or simply becoming comfortable with the practical aspects of managing more money. Each small action helps the nervous system recognize the new circumstances as normal and safe. Another crucial element is what Dr. Kristen Neff calls self-compassion, treating ourselves with the same kindness we would offer a good friend going through a difficult time. Financial transitions can trigger self-judgment, shame, and criticism, but these responses actually slow the adjustment process. Self-compassion involves three components: self-kindness instead of self-judgment, common humanity instead of isolation, and mindfulness instead of over-identification with difficult emotions. When someone is struggling with wealth guilt or success anxiety, self-compassion can provide the emotional safety needed for healthy adaptation. It's also important to recognize that financial transition affects relationships. As circumstances change, some relationships might become strained while others deepen. This is normal and doesn't necessarily reflect anyone's character flaws. It simply reflects the reality that shared struggle or shared success can be important bonds between people. Dr. Terry Orbuch's long-term relationship research has shown that couples often struggle when one partner's financial situation changes significantly. The change can disrupt established roles and dynamics, requiring conscious effort to renegotiate the relationship on new terms. Similarly, friendships might require adjustment when financial circumstances diverge. This doesn't mean the friendships must end, but it might mean finding new ways to connect that don't center around shared financial limitations. The key insight here is that financial adjustment is not just about money. It's about identity, relationships, values, and meaning. Approaching it as a comprehensive life transition, rather than simply a financial change, can help normalize the complexity and reduce self-judgment when the process feels difficult. Professional support can be invaluable during significant financial transitions. This might include financial therapy, traditional therapy, coaching, or simply connecting with others who have navigated similar changes. The goal isn't to eliminate all discomfort. Some discomfort is normal and even healthy during transitions, but to ensure the discomfort doesn't become overwhelming or destructive. Summary: the uncomfortable truth about comfort. We began this exploration with a simple observation. Financial freedom can feel uncomfortable at first, but as we've discovered, this discomfort isn't a bug in the system, it's a feature. It's evidence that change is happening, that old patterns are being challenged, that growth is occurring. The invisible inheritance we received in childhood continues to influence our financial decisions decades later. Those early imprints about money, formed before we could think critically, operate like background software determining our financial behavior. Understanding this inheritance is the first step toward updating the programming. Our identity acts as a fortress, protecting us from experiences that contradict our self-concept. When financial success threatens to change who we think we are, the fortress walls go up. We might sabotage our progress, feel guilty about our achievements, or experience anxiety when things go well. This isn't weakness. It's the normal operation of a system designed to maintain consistency. The comfort zone paradox reveals that familiar doesn't mean comfortable. We can be genuinely unhappy with our financial situation while simultaneously resisting change because change feels dangerous. Our nervous system prioritizes predictability over pleasure, safety over satisfaction. Success anxiety and the fear of visibility remind us that achievement can feel threatening to a brain wired for survival in groups. Standing out has historically been dangerous, and our modern minds still carry that ancient wisdom. The anxiety around financial success often reflects deeper fears about belonging and acceptance. Wealth guilt demonstrates how complex our relationship with money can become when it intersects with values, identity, and social connection. The guilt isn't usually about the money itself. It's about what the money represents in terms of fairness, responsibility, and moral standing. But perhaps most importantly, we've seen that these psychological challenges are navigable. Understanding the transition process, practicing self-compassion, maintaining identity flexibility, and seeking appropriate support can help us move through financial changes with greater ease and awareness. The uncomfortable truth about comfort is that it's not really about external circumstances at all. It's about the alignment between our circumstances and our identity, between our reality and our programming, between who we are and who we think we should be. Financial freedom doesn't feel uncomfortable because there's something wrong with money or success. It feels uncomfortable because it represents change, and change, even positive change, challenges our nervous system's primary directive to maintain predictability and safety. This understanding can be profoundly liberating. When we recognize that discomfort around financial success is normal and temporary, we can stop fighting it and start working with it. We can approach our anxiety with curiosity rather than judgment, our guilt with compassion rather than shame, our resistance with patience rather than force. The goal isn't to eliminate all discomfort around financial change. Some discomfort is inevitable and even healthy. The goal is to understand the discomfort, to recognize it as evidence of growth rather than evidence of failure, and to navigate it with awareness and self-compassion. Remember that 7-year-old at the kitchen table, absorbing lessons about money without conscious awareness. That child did the best they could with the information available, but you are no longer that child. You now have the awareness, tools, and support needed to update that early programming and create a healthier relationship with financial success. The discomfort you feel around money isn't permanent. It's not who you are. It's simply where you are in the process of growth and change. And like all transitions, this one will eventually lead to a new normal, a new comfort zone that includes the financial freedom you've worked to achieve. Outro, as we close this exploration, take a moment to notice what you're feeling right now. Perhaps there's recognition, relief, or even some resistance to these ideas. Whatever you're experiencing is perfectly normal and valid. The journey from financial struggle to financial freedom isn't just about numbers and bank accounts. It's about the evolution of identity, the updating of old programming, and the courage to become someone new while honoring who you've always been. If you found value in this deep dive into the psychology of financial transition, remember that your subconscious mind has been absorbing these insights throughout our time together. The gentle frequencies woven into this audio continue their work even after the words end, quietly supporting your journey toward a healthier relationship with money and abundance. Change happens gradually, then suddenly. Trust the process, be patient with yourself, and remember that discomfort is often the price of admission to a better life. Thank you for sharing this exploration with me. May your journey toward financial freedom be guided by wisdom, compassion, and the deep understanding that you deserve abundance in all its forms.